Okay, I guess we'll go ahead and start. It's about 2 minutes after. I've asked Alex, don't get your own. Alex, to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, now we'll do a roll call. So you, Alex, Bill, Lytle.
Diane Burton.
Okay. Okay, Jared has had previous plans, so he will not be here tonight. Is there anybody that has any conflicts with anything that's going over tonight?
Not here.
Not me.
And I don't either. Now we just need to do consent on the tonight's agenda. The only thing that we are going to change is we're going to discuss 9, and then we'll go back and do 8. So we just swap those two. If that's okay. Do we need to vote on that? I have somebody. No? Okay. Okay. And then the minutes from May 2nd and June 6th. We just need to have, I think on one of them, I wasn't, could be wrong. Okay, does anybody have any questions on the minutes as we have them printed? Let's go with May 2nd first. Okay, I didn't find any, but my memory's shot. Okay, do we have to vote in a second? We have a vote in a second on the May 2nd.
And the agenda.
And to accept the agendas.
I pass that we accept the agenda and the minutes for May 2nd.
I'll second that.
And does anybody have any changes or issues with the June 6th minutes?
I make a motion to accept the June 6th minutes.
I second
that.
Second it.
Alex? Okay, we got that off the plate. Hopefully that's the hardest thing to do. It's cool. Always good. Okay, is there any announcements from anybody to the planning commission?
Not here.
Okay, anything?
Oh, I do have a question. I don't know if it's in order or if I should. But I do have a question about what the difference is between a road plan and a transportation plan. I don't know the difference between those two.
Want to try a stab at that?
Sure.
That'd be the best one, yeah.
The road plan is basically what it says. It's a future plan for where roads will be located, size and general location. Transportation plan often includes other forms of transportation besides just vehicles. So it will include public transit, discussion on a possibly bus system, bicycles, pedestrian, just all forms of transportation. in a lot of cases, there are people view them almost synonymous. You know, they talk transportation, but a road plan is that just that. It is a plan for roads. Transportation is a broader context where it includes, like I say, buses, bikes, walking. If we're in a bigger city, trains, you know, possibly an airport. Is that, so transportation is just a bit the broader, the bigger picture.
So when you talk about a transportation plan, like you said, bikes or whatever, is it like,
Yeah.
we'll have an ordinance for that? Like whether you can ride your bike
No,
in certain places?
No, it's typically a where those routes would be. If you want to have where your bike routes, you would hope to have them in the future. Again, it's a planning document. It says we would like to have bike routes in these locations. We'd like to have a bus route that would go these directions, serve these areas. We would like to, you know, so in most smaller communities, such as Leeds, really all you're looking at is the road plans.
Right.
You know, you're not going to have, I mean, with exception, you probably would want bike paths, and you could, you know, typically you'd include maybe a basic bike route, but, you know, the basic would be the road plan.
Does that answer?
Yes, thank you very much.
And I guess we've got to amend minutes from the meeting on March 7th. Yeah.
But let me explain. Those are just one-way streets. I think 12-foot travel lanes. Okay, talking with Sunrise and understanding the need that the fire district has, we've actually on our cross sections there added an 8-foot fire lane. Is the ultimate source of all the design and how much land we can build this whole thing. The design we love. That's why the happy medium. This is like taking. I mentioned in the meetings before. Never read.
It should be coming up right now.
Or we can just vote on 30 now. I think that would be fine if you want to provide an estimate for us, but I'm getting a guess right now that the radius, you know, you look at a radius on this, you're looking at, to me, close to 800 feet on this. I'm imagining it's not really much. My car did 60 or 80. I think that curve radius is fine. Do you think we're already at 30? But he can't. So then he can come back and change that. Is it going to change the layout and design, the length of the road somehow if it's rated for 35 miles an hour? It may affect the spacing of our intersections. And so the block might be a little longer. Potentially, but we don't even have that answer. It would. The answer is yes. It will affect the spacing. Well, that's the answer I'm looking for. Sorry. You don't want a longer block. Right. That's all I want. Go ahead and vote on that motion first. Right. That's all right. I just want to make sure. Here. All right. Moving on to the next. Did we address the line intersection? Oh, that's right. Yeah, I think we talked about that. So then we got everything. Can I propose, Russ and Commission, can we get a motion on the proposed cross sections? Or do we need a motion on that? I mean, that's this thing you drew up here. Well, it's these documents we submitted on the cross sections, basically, and the I don't know if you want to say that, but that's the curves.
sign up here. What sign?
The only one that's, and there's only one thoroughfare, the landscape way.
Yeah, that's where we're proposing the trail on that right of way. Obviously,
We accept the language on the cross sections that we
Is that
showed
you?
earlier. And that goes along with the 150 foot intersections. Spacing. And, yeah, one way we can move it, what she stated earlier. So do I have a second? Aye. Aye. Then you said something about sidewalks, we're okay with sidewalks, because that's all done there.
yeah, we just confirmed the lane, remember how we did our sidewalk on the lane, we added that.
Right.
So right now there are sidewalks on
All main.
cross sections.
Group.
Thoroughfares.
The only one that's, and there's only one thoroughfare, the landscape way.
Yeah, that's where we're proposing the trail on that right of way. Which obviously, I think there may be some issues there with the clear space requirements for that, traffic transportation. So it may not work. Well, you know, we show on our trail master plan, that's not part of the submittal that we've had that you've already passed on. We show a trail network. And I think we have a trail, so that Harley can double as a trail on that particular area. We show a trail there anyway. We show a bike route, see that could even be a bike lane. Come around that route. Separate. So they can cross that trail. That makes it. I think with that sidewalk there, we're okay. You've got, that means you've got a sidewalk on every road in except for that main road coming in. You've got a trail there for that, unless there's some legal reason. I'm not aware of.
But I think on that, this is just my own personal opinion, you know, the sidewalk out there is not going to do a lot of good because you want all your sidewalks and stuff inside. You don't want the trails for people to get in and out of.
Right.
As far as sidewalks, you don't want them all inside the community rather than outside.
We show the trail as a kind of an internal trail and then a bike route going out to the frontage road, which is actually, you probably know, but it's actually designated as the Quail Creek Loop. It's a pretty major bike route here along Main Street and along the frontage roads, yeah. Actually, the bike route.
Oh, that's it.
We brace that.
The only motion is needed for exceptions, and we're basically meeting, they're going to conform where sidewalks are required. In this case, the one road would be a trail that moves.
The cross section is different than standard. Cross section is sidewalk on one side. Or you can do it. So maybe there should, you know what I think there should be a recommendation or a motion that the cross section be approved. I would say for everyone, with the standard changes. what's the?
Yeah, can you reiterate what this motion is? I'm a little
Well,
bit
it's not that
confused.
we're talking while he's trying to make the motion. Just these cross sections, they've submitted proposed cross sections. We have some concerns with those cross sections. We talked about each of those concerns today, and they've been addressed through several previous motions. So I think that it would be safe and appropriate for the council to approve those cross sections with the conditions of the previous motions. Does that make sense? I shall make that motion. I'll second it.
Is that right?
Aye.
Did you make the motion?
Yeah, that's part of it. Hey, here's a cross section. I think we should all share. That you recommend. With the adjustments made from your previous motions. Basically, the major concerns we had were outlined here, so you address these concerns in the previous motion. So I think that it would be acceptable to approve them approve it with the other conditions that weren't met tonight.
Would you like? Straight.
Yeah, so that that's yeah. Oh, that's in there. That's in there. I know they all have copies. I just think it's tweaked and so sure.
Yeah, can you reiterate what this motion is? I'm a
Well,
little
it's
bit
not that
confused.
we're talking while he's trying to make the motion. Just these cross sections, they've submitted proposed cross sections. We have some concerns with those cross sections. We talked about each of those concerns today, and they've been addressed through several previous motions. So I think that it would be safe and appropriate for the council and the commission to approve those cross sections with the conditions of the previous motions. I shall move that motion. I'll second it.
Who seconded it?
Aye.
You did.
Yeah, that's part of it. I think we should work with Sharon, once she gets these minutes written out. Right, we'll bring that, we're kind of final standards document. I anticipate that everything, all the plans that they do,
Oh, seconded by Bill.
It's a good idea from now on for us to acknowledge who made the motion and who seconded, so the name is there.
That might be good. So right here in the minutes. She's already has the minutes written up. She just wanted to make sure that it was right.
Normally, I think it's really
On
only,
page 2, there's a typo. On page 2,
Okay.
you got GVW instead of GVW. See, when you replace them.
Okay. On E. Oh, okay.
Alex, you asked, is it necessary to state specifically who made it? I would say normally the recorder, if they don't know, they'll ask, now who made that motion, you know, who did? So they'll get it, and normally that would cover it.
Okay, so what other one? Okay, you show me.
And do we need to vote on anything on that, or is it just?
You need to amend the motion to amend the minutes.
Okay.
Okay, I'll make a motion that we accept the amended minutes.
We have to
March
say for
7th.
March
The
7th.
March
Yes.
7th.
I second the motion.
So Alex made the motion and Diane seconded.
Got it.
There you go.
Roll.
Vote. All in favor?
All right.
Aye.
So let's move on then. We're gonna go to number 9, which is the zoning code amendment regarding regulations for short-term residential renters.
Okay, this, along with the sign code, they're just discussion items. Hopefully, we get this ready for a public hearing, because you obviously have to have a public hearing. Hopefully, maybe we can do that at the first meeting in September, and then it goes on to the town council. Just some background for your memory. It's been a couple of months since we've met, so let me just kind of review this. This is a continuation of the discussion that began in June on a possible code amendment for short-term rentals, which are also referred to as vacation rentals. This code amendment provides clearer regulations regarding short-term residential rental properties. Short-term is defined as 29 days or less, and the code amendment applies only to residential zones. Short-term rentals, often referred to as vacation rental homes, is where a dwelling in a residential zone is offered for overnight or weekly rentals, anything less than 29 days, basically a month. If you rent more than a month, no problem, that's not regulated. But less than that is kind of viewed as a commercial activity. So the Leeds Town Code allows for bed and breakfast inns in residential zones subject to conditional use permits and getting a town business license. This proposed code amendment will not affect bed and breakfast inns or their approval process. This code amendment would prohibit dwellings from being rented on a short-term basis unless the dwelling met the requirements for bed and breakfast inn. So planning commission input is desired at this point. Heath Snow, town attorney, has reviewed draft A and feels it is appropriate as drafted. Alternate B is similar to A, except that B would allow for short-term rentals within a residential area if written approval is obtained, either from property owners within the plat, if located in a subdivision, or written approval from property owners within 600 feet if located outside a subdivision plat. Now, the reason we came up with alternate B, if you were here at the last meeting in June, you remember that Jared Westoff requested that we come back with a little different provision. And so I've done that. We'll talk about those with their alternate A and B. So the main finding is that a short-term rental, i.e. overnight or weekly, is a commercial use of the property in a residential zone, and that short-term rentals are often disruptive to the quiet enjoyment of nearby dwellings by their occupants. There are code provisions to allow a bed and breakfast inn, which requires an on-site manager to supervise and be responsible for the property. The bed and breakfast inn typically does not have the same negative impacts, such as noise and parking problems, often associated with an unsupervised rental property. And the reason we're coming forward with this, and I've talked to the town attorney, he agrees that we need to have a little clearer provision. 3 months ago, maybe 4 months, we had an applicant come before the town with an attorney. He made a presentation at the planning commission, they went on and made a presentation at town council. He argued pretty firmly that he felt the code was not clear, that in fact short-term rentals should be allowed. And he made some arguments, and then ultimately the town council turned it down and denied the request. it's my opinion, and also he'd know that it would be better if the ordinance was more clear, so you don't have people, you know, so it's not ambiguous whether it's allowed or not, and people hiring attorneys to pursue it. So, alternate A, and I'm sorry, I missed a couple of, I guess my printer at home, missed a few letters there, but this would be a new code amendment, or a new section in the supplementary chapter. That's chapter 4, which is kind of the catch-all provisions that applies to various zones. So this would be a new section on short-term leases of residential property. The purpose of this section is to promote the health, safety, and general welfare of the residents of the town by establishing zoning regulations for short-term leases of residential property to ensure A, protection of neighborhoods and the community, including compatibility with existing residences, B, promote the peace and quiet of residential neighborhoods, and preservation of property values. The next section is the definition of short-term rentals. I think I took that out of the St. George Code, and they defined short-term rentals, also referred to as vacation rental properties, a property which is used by any person, entity, for hostel, hotel, inn, boarding house, or other transient lodging use where the term of occupancy, possession, or tenancy of the property is for 29 days or less, for direct or indirect compensation. For this section, compensation means money, rent, or other consideration given in return for occupancy or use of the property. So that's the definition. Then the next section, 41.31.3, short-term residential properties. Parentheses, also known as vacation rental properties, are prohibited in all residential zones, agricultural zones, and mixed-use zones unless the property satisfies the following requirements. A, meets the requirements for a bed and breakfast inn and has obtained approval of a conditional use permit from the town council. Or B, property is located within a mixed-use zone and part of a resort development where short-term rental properties are designated as an allowed use on the site plan or subdivision plat, and where such use has been approved by the town council. Section 4 is just business license and transient room tax required. All approved short-term residential rental properties, which would basically be your bed and breakfast then, and possibly a short-term rental in a mixed-use zone. It says, shall obtain a business license from Leeds Town for each short-term residential rental property within Leeds Town limits, and shall be subject to the collection of the municipality transient room tax as allowed under the Utah Code. Transient room tax is, you know, you go to the hotel and they charge you that.
That fee they don't tell you up front.
Right. So that's the alternate. Actually, it's the same one we presented back in June, and it's fairly restricted. It just says, if you're in a residential zone, other than a bed and breakfast, then you don't allow overnight rentals of these homes, overnight or weekly rentals of homes.
Do you have questions?
Well, I've got some issues with that.
Okay.
But the only difference between that and B then is that paragraph C.
Right. So if you go to the next page, alternate C, and this was where Jared Westhoff had asked for maybe some provisions, as I understood. You know, he talked about maybe an overlay zone, etc. Well, we don't want to do an overlay zone because that's really burdensome. When you change and you have a zone, you're you know, that's a major public hearings before the planning commission. You're amending the map. You know, I don't think that we really intended that, but he wanted some other provisions. So alternate B is less restrictive because let's look at, it's identical except for paragraph C. So this paragraph C, it says, going back, it says residential short-term rentals shall be prohibited in residential zones unless it satisfies the following requirements. A and B are the same as we read. C, it says for properties located in a residential zone other than a mixed-use zone, the following provisions apply. If the property is located within a recorded subdivision plat, then all of the owners have agreed in writing that short-term rentals isn't allowed use within the plat area, or the plat contains a note stating that short-term rentals are allowed within the subdivision. 2, if the property is located outside of a recorded subdivision plat, all of the property owners within 600 feet have agreed in writing that the subject property may operate short-term rental subject to approval of the town council and obtaining a business license. So C opens up another option. I mean, that again, C, this whole alternate B then becomes less restrictive than alternate A. So I don't know what your thoughts are, Ben.
Well, with C, would that mean that, like, if I wanted to have some property that I wanted to rent out, I personally would be the one responsible of getting all those signatures?
Yes.
Myself?
Yeah, yes.
Okay, so whoever's renting it out would have to do the work.
Right. Again, when we say renting out, keep in mind, this is like weekly or overnight. If you were leaving town for 2 years and renting your home, we're not talking about that. That's allowed.
Right, because it's longer.
That's right. It's
Yeah.
over a month. Anything over a month is not what we're talking about.
Just rent your house for over a month.
Yeah. So,
The only problem I have, and I don't know, and I hate to even bring this up, is in 431.3, it says short-term rental property are prohibited, and it brings up mixed zone use. But down here, it says property located within a mixed zone use or part of a resort development. To me, that needs to be taken out, that mixed zone use in B. Why tell them no up here and tell them yes down here under certain conditions?
well, the only thing is in the mixed-use zone, for example, you look under the list of permitted uses already in mixed-use zone, one of them is like a hotel, and there's some other uses.
Right.
That, and so it says, B says, you know, if it's in a mixed-use zone and part of a resort development, where the applicant has shown that short-term rentals are one of the proposed uses, and that use is then approved by both planning commission and council,
Okay.
then it would be allowed, you know, and say it's.
So then, should we take out the
And maybe,
prohibited part in the first section?
maybe so, that might help out.
Because I don't know how you can prohibit them in one and let them have it in
Well,
another.
they can read that last sentence, unless the property
Satisfies all requirements. Right.
It may, you know, maybe it's clearer to remove it under the opening, you know, 41.3.3, that's what you're saying. It says, in one it says it's prohibited, and the next one says it's allowed.
Right.
The B says it's allowed if it's this.
I mean, no matter what, it's still gonna come here to meet the rulings on it, but
Yeah.
I just think we're kind of,
Yeah, that may be good to, so you're saying take it out of the top paragraph, but leave it in B?
either way, yeah, one of them needs to be taken out.
Well, let's take out the top one, if that's confusing.
That'd be the same thing in B. Now, my question is, since we've got the two alternates, are we keeping them both open so that when we have our open meeting, we can, our public hearing, they can look at both of them, or is it something we want to vote on and decide which way we're going? Or?
Well, it's a discussion tonight, so you don't really need to vote on it, but, you know, and I guess you could have it, open it up to the public, say, here's alternate A and B, unless you as a planning commission have a kind of a feeling of you prefer one over the other.
Well, me personally, I think if, for C, in some instances, I wouldn't agree with it, just because you never know who it is or what kind of people it is that's going to be rented out. But I can't imagine somebody renting their place out to somebody that would trash it or whatever, that they would really scrutinize them before they even rented it out. And then they, on top of that, they have to do all the work of getting all these signatures on top of that. So it's probably, if they wanted to go through all of that,
The concern
why
is,
not?
well, the concern, as it was expressed, at least at the town council meeting, when the applicant in the Silver Point or Silver Ridge subdivision came forward, there was a big turnout of people opposed to it, was that the vacation rental typically doesn't have somebody there to manage the property. They stop at a real estate office, pick up the keys, or the keys are on site, and there's nobody there to supervise it. So the noise, the partying, the parking, you know, there's very few limitations. You may get 20 people rent the home for a weekend and really cause a disruption. That was a concern expressed. You already have in your ordinance provision for a bed and breakfast. That would continue. So, you know, people could rent out their home if they're willing to keep an on-site manager and have some type of breakfast. I mean, that's not defined. I mean, you may have juice and donuts. I mean, so you still, it's not like you're not removing the option of an overnight or weekly rental. The difference is, under a bed and breakfast, you've got to have somebody there to kind of manage the property, whereas in a typical vacation rental, there is no on-site manager. So that was the concern expressed, particularly the town council meeting, is that, you know, I guess there's been a few that people have rented things and they're having some problems. So,
Well, I guess what I'm thinking is, if I was one of the neighbors and they came to me and said, oh, you know, would it be okay if we rented our house out for a week to somebody that's right next door to you? I would definitely say, well, you know, how old are they? Who are they? You know, I wouldn't say, oh, okay, and I wouldn't just sign it. I would really interrogate.
but
Then-
But once it's signed, it doesn't, from there on, you'll
They
never
can
know.
change it.
right, absolutely. It may be an
They
elderly
can
couple
change
one
It's
weekend
there
and
forever.
20 high school kids the next. I mean.
Oh, they don't have to have it signed every single
No,
time.
it's a one-time
just a
approval.
one-time. Oh,
Right.
okay, then never mind.
It's a one-time approval.
And I can see both
No,
sides of
that
that. I
would
was
be
in
good.
Salt Lake when they had the Olympics up there.
Oh, yeah, they rented.
And a lot of people rented their houses out, and a lot of people made good money,
Right.
but they couldn't fix their house for what they made.
Yeah.
That would pissed off some neighbors too.
Yeah.
You know, I understand that, because you'll put, like you said, 20 to 40 people in a house that normally has 6, where are they gonna park? But I do understand the other side of an individual saying, oh, here's some quick, easy money.
Right.
So, I don't know.
Yeah, I didn't understand. If it's a, you know, a blanket thing, once they have the signatures, and that's just a blanket done
Now,
deal,
your senior problem
then
could
they
be,
can
My
have it
personal
anytime,
opinion is
then
we should
yeah,
stick
I
with
wouldn't agree with that.
alternate A, which is more restrictive.
Yeah,
That was my sense, having sat through the, at least the town council hearing, and we had a lot of residents in Leeds speak, you know, against the vacation rental application, so.
What do some of our local cities do, towns and cities, you know?
I do know Leeds St. George, I was involved in part of that draft team years ago. They have they've allowed it in what they call large planned developments. So in Entrada, the Ledges is going through the application to get it, but in Entrada, in Sun River, there is provision for overnight rentals, short-term rentals. They have areas designated within those developments for overnight rentals. Green Valley, actually, we found that when they were originally approved back in the early 80s, over short-term rentals was one of their permitted uses. We found that after going through a hearing where a lot of residents up there, was in the sports village, came to the council and they were opposed. They were upset with the idea that they felt half of them were permanent residents. They didn't like the idea that the other half were changing every week. And it became quite an issue. But as we went back into the minutes, we found out that they had already been approved that way in the early 80s, so it was, you know, it was already grandfathered, you might say. But we found out that we have had issues where people that live in, you know, subdivisions, they don't want to see the neighboring house change tenancy every weekend. You know, it's very disruptive, and so it kind of changes the character. So St. George has, they've allowed it in a large plan development, and they said if they will allow it out in other residential zones if the property has 2 acres or more and is located on a major collector street, and there's a third one, and gets the approval of property owner within 500 feet. So there's 3 conditions. So they made it very restrictive. There are very few properties that have 2 acres or more. And when you add 2 acres or more, plus located on a major collector road, and get signatures, to my knowledge, you know, there's about 1 that operates in a typical residential area, and we have quite a few in the large resort developments. And you know, I'm not sure what Washington does, but I think most cities. I know we looked at Salt Lake and Sandy that, you know, they specifically address short-term rentals.
Apparently Washington has them because I've talked to a friend of mine who has one. And I don't know what the restrictions are, but just made a comment that he had.
Yeah, okay. Well, and like, you know, Legis is going through it right now where they're going to designate certain areas of their development for short-term rentals. And so if you buy into that, you're going to be aware that, you know, your neighbor may change every week or so. But at least you know going into the development that that's what you're buying into is an area which that is kind of for a resort vacation type area. And if you're not in that area, then you know you expect that you're not going to be subject to those kind of changes.
I don't know, do we want to open it up to the public?
I just have a quick question. Okay.
Sorry, Peter Original. Bob, you said 2 acres or 500 foot away from another resident?
Both. No, it's and.
Both.
It's not or.
And.
Well, not 500 feet away.
What's? I mean, if it's a square, if 2 acres is a square,
Yeah.
what's the dimensions of the property? I'm just curious.
Well, 200 by 200 is about an acre roughly.
So it's 400.
400 by 400.
So you're only going to get one house, one property around at 500 feet. So that
well,
seems
it's 500 feet from the perimeter, from the property line.
from the outside property line, not from the house.
Well, maybe it is from the house. I'm sorry, maybe it is from the house. But you have to.
I'm just curious.
I'm trying to go from. I think it is from the dwelling. So they have 3 criteria, and the purpose again was the council in St. George wanted to be fairly restrictive if it's not in a resort type development. So that's where they made the 2 acre requirement, located on a collector street, and get an approval signature from any neighboring property within 500 feet. So yeah, it may only be 1 or 2 homes on each side.
So it would be more restrictive if it was from the property line out 500 feet?
Yeah, it would be. But
that would be more restrictive?
Yeah, sure.
You know, when I asked you guys to review this conditional use permit, I asked that, you know, in my opinion, it needed to be more restrictive. And I know Jared doesn't agree with that, but I still feel, you know, feel it needs to be more restrictive and more spelled out.
And that's why we have this alternate A, which
I hear that, and that sounded great. I think you're doing a wonderful job. Thank you.
basically, would prohibit them.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, anything else?
I have concerns about that
State
little
us your name.
sentence. Pardon?
Name first, please.
Your name?
Your name?
Oh, Betty McKnight, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
I have a concern about that little phrase, multi-use developments. With 1,200 apartment buildings, units, hard to maybe
Is
rent.
this a question on our drafting here or
Yeah,
on
well,
something
yeah,
totally different?
because I want to ask a question about that.
Okay.
Is that if they're hard, it's hard to rent that many units, and Drake told me last week, Wednesday, that they would be in favor of short-term rentals. So my question is, are we just saying, yes, go ahead and just rent for the 2 days each weekend? I mean, it's still that same.
Are you talking about grapevine or about our
Yeah,
amendment here?
grapevine.
That would be
Because
something we'd have to go through the books and find out. I have no idea.
Because it says,
No.
and it said multi-use.
Mixed use, yeah.
Mixed use.
Oh, mixed
If the
use. Well,
site
isn't
plan,
that what,
subdivision plan or such has been approved by the town council, at this point, I don't know if that's been approved or not. I've never approved that.
isn't grapevine mixed use?
Yeah, but they still have to meet certain criteria to do that.
Yeah, but I'm wondering if we're, just kind of opening a can of worms here.
Oh, but Betty, we're not saying that we're passing the short-term
This is just
rental.
discussions.
Yeah, I know, but I mean, I guess what I'm saying is there a way we could just take out the mixed use and have everything else? Because it is good to protect the city.
Well, we'd have to take out residential zones, agricultural zones. I mean, they're all zoning, they're just mentioning
They're
all the
mixed.
zonings
Those are mixed-use zones.
that the city has. It's actually what it's doing.
Oh, it didn't, I guess I heard that wrong. I was thinking it said that it would be allowed in the mixed use zone. And that was your question, wasn't it, to take it out at the one place where it said you couldn't do it in the mixed
Right.
use? And then the other one you said it could, if they met the
If it met the
provisions.
provisions, just like any other place, if it met the provisions.
Yeah.
I mean, you could have one across the street if everybody came in town and says, oh, go ahead, let them do it.
That was my concern, is
Yeah.
that one part of it.
Okay, thank you. Are we good?
I'm not trying to say that I like the alternate meeting. I hate to see us just shut everything out, and keep people from using the property. With the restrictions we have on here, it's not bad to me.
I mean, 600 feet from your property, especially as small as most of the properties are, will cover a lot of people, a lot of legwork for somebody. I know I mentioned this to one person and I got my head bit off. I won't mention who that is because I have to go home. She says, you can't restrict people on what they do with their property. I'm not. So I understand what you're saying there.
And here's the other thing, is obviously you don't, the purpose tonight isn't to make a decision.
Right.
Obviously, it's just to discuss it, and that's the purpose of the public hearing then, is to get the public feedback. And then you make a decision after you've listened to all those comments. So I'm suggesting, if you think we're ready, we could have a public hearing and maybe just take both, alternate A and B. And like I say, B is the same except for that one paragraph C, which just opens up a little more flexibility. So.
Yeah, I mean, I'm good either way, but I think a lot of it should be the townspeople, but I hope we have townspeople on both sides instead of just one side or the other. So if we have none, that would be great. I'm kidding. So, no, we're good.
Let's get it done.
Jerry, do you have it on the?
I just wanted to clarify one thing, since you sound as if you may be considering it. It was said if it's 200 by 200 is 1 acre, 400 by 400 is 4 acres. You actually, it's more like two acres.
208 feet square.
So just, if you're going to be considering that, just be mindful that the math, you're going to be including different.
Well, it's on here it's 600 feet. It doesn't have
Yeah,
acreage on
we
it.
don't have that 2 acre minimum in this ordinance or anything.
That 600 feet would be more than any 2 acre feet.
Exactly. And that depends on how your acres split up too, so. But, okay, well, let's move on to, if we have a little more discussion on this.
So as you preface kind of, so maybe we're ready for public hearing, perhaps September, and just go with alternate A and say alternate, B, I mean, both of them, they're on the table for discussion. Okay.
I think so.
that would be good, personally,
Are you gonna set a public hearing?
Yes.
Or when?
next time.
Next, do we have to vote on that? Or just all agree on that?
So that would be September 5th, I think, is that right?
Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
So then we'll move on to the discussion on the sign ordinance.
Sign on
Okay, well, this is also, obviously, it's a discussion and it's a continuation of the previous discussion we've had about some changes on the sign code. And I'm recommending a few changes, fairly minor in the residential zone. I think your sign code in the residential zone is basically okay, so the tweaks are really minor, I think. But the commercial, I think the sections are a little confusing and kind of complicated. So we tried to simplify the standards for commercial signs. And the main change to commercial sign regulations is to simplify the standards down to 3 types of signs. One is a wall sign, which is a sign mounted on the building. And then second would be a freestanding monument type signs, which the town has regulations that are pretty good, and the changes on that are pretty minor. And then pole signs for commercial property, and we've suggested that be 1 acre minimum and located within 500 feet of one of the freeway interchanges. So we prepared a 2-page summary rather than giving you the entire 25-page sign document. At this point, and so we'll just kind of quickly review this 2-page summary of the changes. Let me just read the summary again. It says the attached 2-page document lists the proposed changes by section of the sign code. The main changes deal with signs in commercial zones. Wall signs attached flat to a building wall cannot exceed 10% of the front wall area, which is the building's front facade. And the second wall on the side or rear of the building cannot exceed 5% of the wall area. The regulations for monument type signs remain basically unchanged, except that commercial properties with more than 100 feet of street frontage may have a sign up to 120 square feet in size, rather than the present maximum size of 85 square feet. So right now you have a monument sign, and it's just one provision for all properties. It doesn't differentiate on the size. So in the amendment, we said if you have a bigger property, you can have a little bit bigger sign. See, right now the sign code says the maximum size is 85 square feet total, which includes the base plus the sign. Then 4 sections in the existing code would be replaced with 2 much simpler sections. Pole signs up to 35 feet tall would be allowed for commercial property within 500 feet of an I-15 freeway interchange. The freeway is a commercial pipeline bringing potential customers and sales tax to Leeds, but a business catering to I-15 travelers will only be successful if the traveling public is aware that the interchange area business is aware of the interchange area business, and that is where the pole sign is important. After hearing the Planning Commission input, staff will make necessary revisions to the draft. Then the proposed draft will be considered by the Planning Commission and later the Town Council in public hearings. In the attached draft, new sections are underlined and wording proposed to be deleted as a strike through. So going to this 2-page summary, you all have this 2-page bullet summary in the under the section where it says signs not requiring town approval or permit, the recommended that a construction sign, is a project under development, commercial, could be commercial, residential. Right now the current size is 8 square feet. That's a 2x4 sign, 2 foot by 4 foot, pretty small. Change it to 32 square feet, which is more standard. The sheet of plywood. Civic signs, it was noted that the sign entrance on the south entrance to Leeds is about 72 square feet, so that's what we cleared that. Real estate signs, right now the ordinance says a maximum of 4 square feet, which is a 2 foot by 2 foot. That's also pretty small. It's a maximum of up to 8 square feet. Political and campaign signs, right now there's a 30-day time limitation on posting of campaign signs. I think that's probably been kind of ignored. So we need to change it to 90 days or just eliminate any time limitation altogether. You could change it to 90 days or something like that. But political speech, campaign signs under the law have a special status, and very few limitations are allowed on campaign signs. So, I mean, you have some provisions, and one of those, again, says 30-day limitation. So we need to change that because obviously we've got the campaign sign popped up already.
I've been there for a month or two.
Yeah, I understand that, but the election still.
Yeah, I don't care if they come up, I just wish when the election is over.
They go down.
Right. Well, there is a provision on this that says it has to be out within 3 days after that. But moving on then, under the section where it says signs requiring town approval, i.e. a permit, and then signs in the commercial zones, suggesting we delete these sections, you see at 22.2.2.1 through set 4, which is 4 sections, and replace with 3 simpler provisions that for wall signs, and then the freestanding signs. And the freestanding signs obviously consist of your monument signs, which you have regulations already and are pretty good. So we're not, and then you don't have regulations for pole signs, and we're suggesting that near the freeway, you probably should make an allowance for a pole sign near the freeway. So under wall signs, is each commercial building or tenant therein may have one front wall sign not to exceed 10% of the building's front wall area, or 10% of the tenant's front facade area. Such wall sign shall be attached flat against the building's wall and shall not extend above the roof peak or parapet wall. The second wall sign is allowed on the side or rear of the property with the maximum sign area not to exceed 5% of the wall area. If there's any questions on that, I've got some photos I'm going to pass out just a minute so we can reference that. Let me just go on then. The monument signs, that's addressed in section under your current sign ordinance, that's 22.2.2.1. The monument signs shall be mounted on the ground with a solid base. The size of the base shall be no larger than 30 square feet and a height not to exceed 2 feet. I think that's your basic code today. The sign portion of the monument shall not exceed 55 square feet, with the top of the sign no more than 10 feet above average ground level. So that's what you allow, and those are pretty good. The sign shall be within the property for which it advertises and shall not encroach into any public right-of-way or public property. And I would allow this provision for properties with more than 100 feet of public street frontage. Additional sign area would be allowed based on the amount of street frontage. An additional 1 square feet of sign area for each 2 feet of public street frontage in excess of 100 feet up to a maximum size of 120 square feet total. That's the base plus the sign area. For commercial property, 1 acre or larger and within 500 feet of a freeway interchange, as measured from the center of the freeway cross street, may have a pole sign with a maximum height of 35 feet and maximum size of 150 square feet. Let me just pass out these some pictures. This is not a real extensive survey, but it gives you a little feel for maybe some sizes. I could bring back more signs, and if you do a PowerPoint, it'd probably be appropriate at the public hearing, but let me just show you a couple here. This, on Sunset Boulevard in St. George, there's a new Carl's Jr. This happens to be the sign. I had all the size data. It's 21 feet to the top, and it's 100 square feet in size. And so you can see, if you're out on the traveling on Sunset Boulevard, 100 square feet is not a particularly large sign. So then if under, and the next one shows the new Neaters on Bluff Street in St. George. That's 24 feet tall and 110 square feet for both of those sign cabinets, 124 square foot total, or 110 square feet total. Again, you know, not a very big sign. So if Leeds were to allow a pole sign that you were hoping would catch or be in view of the traveling people on 515, then 150 square feet is not too big. I mean, in fact, that may be too small. I'm sure the sign company would say they'd like that, you know, they'd suggest something taller. But I think 150, which is, you know, 10 by 15 or something, would at least give the opportunity for a freeway-oriented business to get their name or something out, you know, whether it's a gas station or a convenience store. That's sign.
Is this Carl's Jr. considered a pole sign?
Pardon me?
Is this Carl's Jr. sign considered a pole sign?
Yes. Yes. They're just, it has a little more pole, has some cladding, you know, a little more. So then, look, there's a couple of pictures of some monument signs, just to give you a feel for the size and the Harmons on 700 South and River Road. That sign is 15 feet wide and 8 feet tall. That's 120 square feet. And so that's what we're suggesting under the amendment, is that for larger commercial developments, those that have more than 100 feet of frontage, which I don't know that today you don't have any, but someday you might, could have a monument sign up to 120 square feet. And I think if you look at it, it sounds big, but in reality here, it's not that, really not that large a sign. There's a couple other pictures of the Maverick there, also 700 South River Road. That's 48 square feet, and the Sky West sign is 6 feet high with a 22-foot base, 108 square feet. So that just gives you maybe a little feel for sign, and I mean, it's pretty limited, but it maybe gets you a little, sometimes these numbers, they sound like they're really big signs, but when you stick them up 35 feet in the air and you expect to view them from 200 feet away or 300 feet, they're not that big. So anyway, yeah. Those are the real main changes in the sign ordinance, the ones we've just gone over. The wall sign, allowing a little bit bigger monument sign, and then a new provision for a pole sign. Already in your sign code, you allow for an off-premise sign, or if you remember, we tweaked that a little bit. It says the off-premise sign allowed in again, commercial zones. This is a business off-premise sign. Allowed in this section may be closer than 600 feet to the business location if the turn in or from the principal access street is required within the 600 feet. Now, if you remember, today, your ordinance says you can have an off-premise sign, but it can't be closer than 600 feet. And it was Doug Erdman who suggested, well, what about if somebody has to make a turn within that distance? It shouldn't be accommodated then, so that's why he made this change. So the sign, that off-premise sign, could be closer than 600 feet if there's a turn required. Monument signs at the entrance to subdivision, change the sign area from a maximum of This is mine, okay, 30 square feet to 32, I guess that's something to accommodate, 4x8, the typical 4x8 sign would be 32 square feet. The sign base would remain at 24 square feet, which is 2 feet tall by 12 feet. And then the next section, business sign in a residential zone. So this is, like a home occupation. Signs for home occupation with the maximum size of 4 square feet. Today in the sign code says it requires a conditional use permit. To me, that seems a little unnecessary to require a conditional use permit for that home occupation sign. So I'd suggest delete the requirement for conditional use permit. Note that a business sign for home occupation of 4 square feet, 2 by 2 is quite small. But maybe that works, that's all. But I just, especially under today's state law where it says conditional use permit shall be approved unless there are negative impacts you can identify. So I just think I don't think it's necessary for somebody to come to the planning commission and then town council to get a home occupation sign. So, that's, the next section, you have sections on business signs for mobile home park and RV park. I think that's okay. I have to reference back to the section, but it seemed okay. There's a requirement or an allowance for a identification sign on an apartment or apartment complex, multifamily development. That seems okay. You have provision for temporary banners. Right now, the maximum allowed size of 16 square feet. That's 2 by 8 or 4 by 4 is rather small, but maybe that works. A more suitable size seems to be somewhat larger, 4 by 8 which is 4 by 8 or 3 by 10. And your ordinance says 17-day period, which seems adequate. And under your current code, banners are limited only 4 times a year. So I guess moving on, and then under requirements in your sign code, it says the sign materials, it's fairly limiting, wood, stone, etc., but you don't have a provision, say, for plastic or other high-tech resin materials. I think that should be added because a lot of the newer signs are these high-tech resins. Then you have a requirement in the sign code for an advertising master sign plan, and we've suggested that probably could be deleted. It seems a little confusing. Another thing that's probably not necessary under the permit process, this current sign ordinance says anytime there is a change of ownership in the property, you have to notify the town regarding the sign. It says notification change, recommend this section be deleted. Because I don't think it's happening, and I think that's an unnecessary requirement that, if the sign's permitted and it meets the code, the fact that the property sale requires somebody to notify the town. So, and then again, the master sign program section and this master advertising sign program requirement probably could be deleted to simplify the code. And those are basically the changes. So I don't know if you have any comments or questions.
The only question I've got, and I'm sure I said it somewhere in the big picture, the big 25-page thing, but on your pole signs, are they allowed to just find a property owner to put them up on?
It has to be on premise. On
their commercial
business.
property.
It has to be on the site where the business is located. And I think, you have the entire 25-page code showing the deletions and the proposed additions. But here's the section on the pole signs. It says, I can't remember what it said. I may not have it. one pole sign up to 35 feet high as measured from adjacent ground level is permitted for a commercial property 1 acre or larger and located within 500 feet of the freeway exit as measured from the center point of the freeway cross street. The pole sign shall not exceed 150 square feet in sign area, which is measured on one face of the sign. And pole signs shall be separated by at least 100 feet from any other commercial pole sign. So that's the, and because Leeds today does not allow any pole signs, we started out pretty restricted.
Yeah.
In reality, 35 feet tall and 150 is not a big sign. Comparison, just for comparison, St. George, I'm not necessarily suggesting Leeds go that direction, but St. George, if you're near a freeway, goes 50 feet tall and 300 square feet tall. So that's just the comparison. And so it's whatever Leeds wants to build.
What does that say about the property size? It's got to have a property size approximately a certain distance from the freeway?
Well, right now they strapped and say this, the commercial property to be 1 acre or larger. And that that's
Got to be 500 feet.
within 500 feet of the interchange. That may be, you may want to loosen that up a little.
I don't think there's anybody within 500 feet of the freeway.
Isn't your
Well, Walton Plaza.
the one across the street, is that, maybe that's...
Both of those maybe. But that'd be the only.
And that's just, there's nothing,
No, anything about the 500 feet,
but it just says the commercial property 1 acre or larger and located within 500 feet of a freeway exit as measured from the center point of the freeway.
so it could be closer. So it can't be further away, that sounds pretty limited.
Yeah, well, and it is kind of limited. And maybe that's too restrictive. I mean, say, I'm starting out pretty cautious here because I don't, this hasn't gone to the town council, so I don't know what their concerns are, but I'm going cautious because today Leeds doesn't allow any pole signs, and now we're going to open it up to allow pole signs near the interchange. 500 feet is pretty restrictive, and maybe 700 or 800 feet might be a little more common. And maybe what we need to do is get some maps out and draw some distances. See where that 500 feet falls. Go ahead.
I'm Manuel Goy. You haven't discussed how you're going to light up this signs? Have any ordinance on how you light them up? Because the reason I'm concerned about is we have this billboard right along the 15 freeway. There are about 4 of them. And if they light them up, I can see them on our property, and it looks like big headlights facing you. I mean, it looks like 4 cars coming toward you right by your window there. Now, even though they're almost 4 miles away, but they're bright. So that's something we might be concerned. Even if we put, let's say, a sign at the Walton Plaza that is so bright at night, I mean, those residents over here on the main street would be bothered by it.
That's a good point. Right now, we don't have any standard. We could put some. We could add some lighting. Right now, of course, Leeds has prohibited additional billboards in town. I mean, I applaud Leeds for doing that. I think that's good. Right now, you don't allow any more. The existing ones do often have the external lights that shine on the billboard at night, which is difficult. So for the pole signs,
Most of your pole signs for businesses are
they're an interior lighting system. Yeah, and typically you don't get any extremely bright from an internally lit sign. So I don't know that would typically be a problem.
that's another discussion. With that, you get the LED lights on some of them that read out ice cream $1.25.
Yeah.
And you get them, and you get them in red, and you don't. not that Leeds has any stoplights, but you go down St. George Boulevard, you can see all these red lights. I don't want sheriff to pull me over. Exactly. You know, there's a lot, I think the lighting on the signs is a whole different ball of wax. I'd like to see how some other cities have handled that. Because I know, I was reading through one of the town, or listening to one, or read some other town council minutes, and they were going over actually the lighting of signs. I think actually with this work, and they were trying to make it to where, not outlaw, but restrict the LED lights that read different things that were red.
The message boards.
The message boards. They didn't want to allow any more red ones. They've already got 4 or 5 down through there now.
Yeah. I don't, that's another good point. We have not.
Well, in the original 25-page ordinance sign thing on 22.3.1 on material, it says signs may be constructed of painted, stained, or carved wood, brick, or stone, or metal, which is painted or anodized or otherwise treated to prevent reflective glare. So we're already saying not to have anything that's gonna, you know, be shiny or reflect the glare of any kind in the original ordinance.
But with our pole signs, if business would want to attract people up the freeway, it's going to have to be lit.
Yeah.
So that might be a whole other,
Car lights.
not reflective. So that's something I think we ought to, I would rather, I mean, that says a lot of the budget, have something in there.
So we need to revise
You want
that
something
a little
maybe
bit.
about message boards? Is that too something?
Yeah.
Because that's a good point. You could,
Well, I can't see anybody doing that right now, but
you know,
I don't want to have to cross that bridge later and redo it.
okay.
Because I know, like the turret kind of fall.
Should we bring this back as some more discussion item next time still?
Yeah.
Should we massage it a little more? And then maybe look, maybe in October have that public hearing.
I think our, probably here on our, other one's going to take some time.
Oh, no, here's another section. 22.3.5, distractions. No sign shall be revolving, have flashing lights, intermittent lights, or any type of motion, either attached to the sign or adjacent to the sign, intending to call attention to the sign.
What section is that again?
22.3.5.
Yeah. That's
But-
good. That's a good provision to have in there, but
But I think, like the kind of lighting you're talking about, where it's just a light,
right,
you know, you don't want something flashing or
right.
whatever, but.
Yeah, this is a good provision because it prohibits the revolving, flashing lights, intermittent lights,
So that would be,
or any type of motion, you know, any moving sign. That's,
Right.
you know, so that's good to have in there.
yeah.
But it doesn't address just the internal lit sign and,
Yeah.
you know, so on.
Light.
The other, you know, just as a sidelight, one of the big issues that's kind of across the state, across the country right now is the request from billboard companies to convert the standard conventional billboards into electronic digital billboards.
Sunset.
Yeah, and they're happening all over, you know, because obviously the billboard company can have a lot more customers on one sign if they can get it digital, but in Leeds, you know, I think to Leeds' credit, they have basically prohibited billboards other than, you know, whatever exists out there today. So, you know, you shouldn't be faced with that problem if somebody wanted to come and then it would be, you know, a change to a non-conforming sign, and they'd have to go through the, I guess, Plan Commission and Town Council to get a change.
Good. Because those signs, I think, I mean, just the billboards themselves are distracted. You get them that you have to read, and then it changes. You're sitting here like this trying to read.
Yeah.
Maybe I should put curfew hours on those too.
On the web. I'd like to do that on some lights that are just in town.
So, pretty late, I won't name any.
I can't name any either, and I can't say what
Shut
that
it on midnight, you can see the stars.
Just,
Yeah.
Yeah,
yeah.
people have, no, not, people have night lights that run all night long because they're censored. They're censored, because they've got the night sensors on them, so their night lights run all night long, and it's the street lights. I've got on the side of these in my bedroom, never dark. Is there anything else we need to discuss at this moment? I think we need to go for 8:30.
The Olympics are on.
They are?
You want a motion?
Need
Yes,
that in a
please.
minute.
I make a motion that we adjourn. My name is Alex Leo.
No.
We want a second. No second? I'll second it. Bill?